Hello, this is Blaire Stanislao with the Happy Lion Center. Welcome to our podcast, Mystical and Infamous, where we have playful and easy conversations about anything mystical, getting to the heart of all things strange and weird. Join us in a bit of magical tomfoolery, spreading the alchemy of love and light. And now, we invite you to enjoy the show.
It doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter whether it's religious, spiritual, physical. It's what we are fit to do. And that changes through time. But there's a certain amount of growing and maturing that takes place through the years. And as it does, you begin to realize I've been readied for the call because I'm at the end. And I'm embracing it with all my heart. I love it. But it isn't that I am sitting back watching TV, although I get to now a little time. But it was 2 days ago that I'm an oblate of the Annunciation Monastery in Bismarck, North Dakota. That means I am connected with the Benedictine lifestyle because those sisters are Benedictines. And they've been there for 150 years or 130 years or something. Anyway, when I was going to school there in my 40s, I embraced their way of life. And so this contemplative life has called me all of my life. And yet it's been very, very clear in my call that I don't work in the church, although I've worked in the church a lot. I have always gravitated that direction. I've always wanted to do that, and I've done plenty. Director of religious ed, catechist, and teacher of religion, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so connected, but the call isn't there. It absolutely is not there. When I do education, it's not in the church, although I can teach you all of the catechism of the Catholic Church, and you can decide whether or not you embrace it. Okay, and that's my thinking. It isn't this goal to get you to be a little Catholic. Uh-huh. It's a goal to present you with the information. You make your decision. Okay, so when I went to and also much of my education, upper education, is Catholic universities. Anyway, I went to the University of Mary, and I loved their lifestyle. And I couldn't figure out, how do I become a monk in contemporary world, And that's basically what I'm doing, and have been floundering around trying to figure out, because it's like all of my work in healing work, in caring for others, in being present, all of it has been part of that call. And I've known that since I was a little girl. But it's like the pieces begin to make sense. They're like a flower that opens up in me. And now I can see, as I moved through all of those years, those decades, that I was being fitted for what I'm doing here. So it pops into my head a couple of days ago about being an oblate of the Benedictine sisters in Bismarck. And when you have taken a promise to remain faithful to that particular monastery. There's a real stability about that kind of choice. Anyway, so I was thinking, this Richard Rohr has me captivated. I find him absolutely phenomenal, and his people that he puts on his podcasts and has classes. I'm going to be taking one beginning at the end of the month. The different things he offers are all about the contemplative world. And so my whole goal has been that direction. So here it pops in that oblate message. You're an oblate of the Benedictines. And yes, I am. And what does that really mean to you, besides following a prayer form or being out in the world, because you're not behind closed doors in community? Because that's lonely, not having the community. because the community helps feed you and give you other ways of thinking. I'm on my own out here. I mean, I can read, but
Yeah.
I'm on my own for the prayer, for the, those kinds of things. And so I was thinking that, and then I kind of dropped it. And yesterday it popped in there really strong. And I thought, oh, that's a piece of Spokane now. How that's going to show up and how that's going to work, I don't know. But I also know that I am going to be taking this course from Richard Rohr. Now, he's Franciscan, he's not Benedictine. But the Franciscan sisters in Great Falls have had profound effect on me. And they have what they call the secular Franciscans, which are people who attach themselves to the monastery and they live a Franciscan way of life attached to that monastery. And I'm because I'm an oblate of the Benedictines, I cannot do that unless I'm released of my promise with the Benedictines, and I'm not going to do that. But this has something to do with here in Spokane. It's another little piece of information, along with the Reiki. That's a piece of information, along with doing podcasts with you. That's a piece of the information. I'm learning things. And I don't know what I'm going to do. All I know is before I left Great Falls, it was very clear that I will not know what the plan is unless I moved.
Yeah.
And I moved. So I get to find out what the plan is. I also understood, and I don't know how I do this, but I understood I won't know this before next year.
Oh, so you got that. So what I'd like to kind of touch on, because that was such a beautiful presentation of what it is to navigate figuring out what your call is. I mean, that is sort of what we sort of touched on right at the beginning. And but it's really frustrating as you're going through it if you don't have somebody who tells you this kind of thing, says, you're doing fine, just go, listen to your heart, go forward, take one step at a time, right? But if you don't have somebody constantly doing that, you have to remind yourself that, and it can be really frustrating. Even, I mean, we were just talking about, I was going to shift things within my business to be more aligned with what I felt was my call. It's not that I mean, I don't even know what it is fully either, but it's not that what I have done in the past was not what I was necessarily meant to do or my call or whatever. Maybe you can clarify for me. It's not that I feel like I've gone on the wrong path, but I
No,
definitely don't feel like what I've done so far has not been the strongest, the clearest. Oh, yes. I mean, there are parts that I'm like, oh, yes, 100%, right? But it's not like this cohesive, neat package thing that people present in our Western society. Oh, I've got everything figured out and I'll show you exactly how to do it and that kind of thing. That's not how it works.
not at all. Not at all. When you get into the world of spirituality and you begin to learn to listen with those ears, then different things happen, and you see the things will be kind of panoramic sometimes, and sometimes they'll just be a little tiny chunk of something that goes, oh, because we're paying attention. But learning to pay attention to our call is altogether different than learning a job.
So would you say that learning to pay attention to the call, of course, it's intuition,
Yeah.
being in the zone, whatever you want to call it, listening to your heart. Okay. Yes, that's the avenue through which you feel like what the call is, but it sounds to me like you're describing the call is in a way as like your main purpose in life, in this lifetime. Is that okay? So I
But it's
think
bigger than a purpose,
say it
because
again.
it's also a purpose that's just on earth. This purpose is eternal.
Okay, so
And
it's the call of the soul.
yeah, we can call it the soul. That's
Yeah.
because that's what's it within the physical body. And the soul then has a lot of aspects to it that are positive and negative. That's human. And that's not a bad thing. Even the negative can be a little clue to the call if we pay attention and don't view it as bad, 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 get rid of it. Ooh, you're gonna burn in the fires of hell for that.
Well, I think most people from the stories that I've heard so far, I mean, I don't feel like I have completely done it. Maybe I have. I probably have done it and didn't recognize it, but I'm starting to recognize it more consciously now that those bad parts, if people label them bad, whatever you want to call them, but basically they're your struggles, right?
Yeah.
Those things are the way. You have to go through that. You have to heal that. When you heal that, then you have more clarity as to what your call is. But if you're constantly shunning it away, saying, "Oh, that's bad. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to deal with it," then you don't have clarity because all you're doing is blocking those senses to be able to listen to that intuition.
Well, and we hear that in psychology a lot. Avoidance doesn't work. We
Mhm.
have to go through it, around it, over it, under it, but we have to go through. We have to. We can do all sorts of things to get through, but we have to go through it because if we don't know what's on the other side. We can't get to the other side. We
Yeah,
can't.
and I want to pull this out because this is a really very, very tangible example of that. Okay, so yes, my husband died in 2013, and I had my own like thought processes around where my focus was. So first was about the kids, make sure that the kids did not think it was the end of the world because he died. Then the next thing I was most concerned about was his parents, to make sure that his parents were okay. Of course, I put myself third, which didn't help, but whatever, that was the path. But what I noticed as I was going through this, because those two things were so important to me, specifically my kids. It wasn't just that, but it was a lot of other things. But, I got around other grieving people, not necessarily physically. I eventually did this online. But what I found was, you're there, you're talking with them, you're feeling similar feelings, you're going through it with them essentially. Okay. And then I watched how different people dealt with it. Like, what did they do to make themselves feel better? How did they soothe themselves? Well, you have one group that, like one group that I was in was like, Christian something or other, Christian widows or something like that. So they leaned on the Bible or their religious upbringing. And then you have other groups like the one that I enjoyed the most was the dark humor group because they would make jokes about everything, right? And
How funny.
oh,
How
it was the best.
wonderful.
It was definitely the best. Um, and then and then you have different groups that do different things. And what I notice is like, because grieving is so powerful, it eliminates not all, it eliminates a lot of the taboo, the adherence to the belief in the taboo. Okay. So if you take away that's all taboo and you just talk about anything or you embrace whatever's going on, then a lot of restrictions are lifted for you. And I don't mean like you have the freedom to do anything what you do, but you release that judgment. And
Yeah,
so then when you release it enough, then you can be yourself more. So one of the avenues that I noticed that a lot of people would do to cope. So this is I feel terrible. I want to feel better. I take an action, whether it's go talk to a group, pray, whatever it is. A lot of them would go down the drinking hole, drinking alcohol or pot or whatever, right? And as I watched this kind of like unfold in front of me, my father was an alcoholic. So, I mean, I didn't necessarily have that much of an opinion. I mean, you definitely have consequences and it can be a real problem, but I don't necessarily shame him or anything like that. Like, I don't know. I don't have all that negativity, even though I had an alcoholic father. So I watched this stuff happen. And as I'm interacting with these people on a regular basis, I don't know. I just saw that's just totally a coping mechanism. Like you're eventually going to have to get out of that. So I
or
decided for whatever reason, probably because my father was an alcoholic, that was some of it, is that I wasn't going to do that. Like I didn't really like drinking anyways, but I just wasn't going to do that. It could be very easy to go down that hole. So I just chose not to do that. But I think that's a really good example of where are you like, because you're pushing away whatever it is you have to deal with.
yeah,
Whereas if you are able to sit with that discomfort, then you're able to then you have the ability to go through that. I'm not saying it's easy, but you have the ability to go through that. and come out the other side.
Every time you go through it and you move through it, you gain confidence that you can do it again. I
Yes.
mean, it comes around and it's always harder. The challenges in life are always harder. I don't know why they can't get easier, but you can believe in yourself that this too you can do.
Okay, so if we take that and we apply that to, I'm going to use words that I think that most people would use, just figuring out what your calling is.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily, here's my question is, do you think it's really, because a lot of times we'll say, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, right? And in artwork, you say, it's not about the outcome, it's about the process. You go through the process, you have lots of things happen. How would you apply that to finding your calling? Because as a person who is led to the spirit world in whatever form you want to call that, okay? So like, we'll just say, I know I've been there since day one, okay? But it's very hard to articulate that to people, to explain. Repeatedly I find myself saying, no, that's not my interest. Here's my interest. Like, and it's very close. It's like somebody's asking me to do something and I'm like, oh yeah, that's interesting. I'm drawn to you. I want to do these things. But then I'm like, yep, nope, that's not it. Because they say or they do something and I'm like, nope, that's not in alignment with me. But I don't even recognize that I've been doing that my whole life.
And when there's several pieces here that you're talking about that I think are really important. One of them is that consciousness. When we come to a consciousness about something, we begin to interact with a paradigm. The hardest thing in the world to shift is a paradigm. And we will not shift it unless we're challenged to. And we will either keep it and lock in with all of our heart, or we will change. Change will change a paradigm. Okay. So when you have this awareness that comes, and it doesn't have to be a big life-changing thing, but this awareness can come and you realize, oh, I can do this another way. But I don't know how my friends are going to feel about it. I wonder what my dad's going to say. I mean, I'm talking about being a younger person.
Yeah.
And I know my mom will kill me. Okay. So there's just different things that can happen in that awareness. Simple one for me. Years and years ago, I was at a class meeting kind of thing at the church, and I've been involved in a healing prayer group for years and years. And so this particular embracing of this healing life was in a video that was being offered. And there's one thing that was said there, and it's stuck with me all these years. And it was, are you going to be the one who stands in the gap? And I thought, oh, I can do that. I know how to do that. And I don't know why I knew that, but I knew it. And I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I knew I could do it. And then there's another piece that you're talking about, and that's the connection of listening. When we begin, okay, there's a whole lot out there right now. All the gurus are talk about meditation. It started years and years ago with TM and that kind of thing, which was much more stylized and deep and very profound for people. Change their lives, change their paradigms. Mm-hmm. And that's meditation will do that. But meditation also teaches you to get in touch with who the real person is, your higher self. Mm-hmm. In Christian circles, they would say, getting in touch with God. Well, okay, whatever you want to put it for a title, I don't care. The point is learn to listen. And when you do begin to listen, it isn't the voices outside, although those have to be there. Mm-hmm. But when we're younger, we listen to more of them and see what they do to learn what we want to try to see if it fits. There's nothing wrong with that. We need to. But then there has to be this quiet time. And that is the hardest thing, in my opinion, to do because I'm busy. I like to move. I remember years ago, I listened to a speaker named Gene Wiesner. He's from Billings, Montana. And he said that he talked with God on the run. that he never had time to stop and do the pray and all of this, but it would be like, come on, Lord, let's go. And you can talk to me in the car, you can talk to me on the bus, you can talk to me anywhere. And that's pretty much how he did his relationship with his God as he understood him. And I always thought that was kind of interesting that we each have our own way of listening.
Mhm.
Now, that was far more masculine,
Mhm.
but I've done a lot of that through the years. A lot of that because I've been busy. Who has time to stop? You know, I was taught as a little girl, when you pass the church, you go in and you make a visit and that stop and take some time with the Lord. So I practiced that, but I never quite knew what to do.
So some of that was more of a formality. This
Yeah,
is
a cultural thing,
yeah.
you know, but forming paradigms.
Yeah.
But out of that, also, I could examine, but you did that. You did do it. You didn't know what you were doing, but you tried it. And that too has lent itself to me in a whole nother way because I aged and I aged with that kind of thinking. And that I don't have to go into the church for that. I go inside me, into my soul, which is where church is.
Yeah. I can remember being, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I can remember being young. I went to an Episcopal school when I was very young. So kindergarten, first and second grade.
Which in
And
my opinion is Catholic, but don't tell people I said that.
uh I I don't know. I didn't have any questions then. I was too young. But then I remember going somewhere else and somebody was, I don't know, there were like all these, I guess it felt like instructions of how to pray, right? And
Oh,
it was
they're
different from
important
what I had
rules. They're
learned.
very important.
I know. It was different than what I had learned initially. And
Interesting.
I remember thinking, what? That's different. Like, and whoever presented it to me, it did feel very important to them and very correct. And therefore that means that any other way is incorrect. Okay. But I
Oh, yeah.
had developed enough of a connection with those other people that I knew that those other people were not incorrect. Right. So I didn't dare tell that person, I don't think you're completely correct to say that's the only way. But I kind of just like went with it. And that, of course, became like the theme of my life. But what that did is it was kind of like a catalyst to say, oh, this is the right way to do it. And I was like, what? No, I don't think so. Like, okay, I'm going to let you have your own opinion about how you do it. And I'm going to do it my own way. And matter of fact, I was so in a way, it's a little rebellious. And I was so rebellious in that way that I was like, I didn't tell anybody. Like, I didn't say anything to anybody. I was just like, yeah, I'm not doing it that way. It works this way. I probably did try, for the most part, I do try the way that they present, and then I'm like, okay, yeah. That's why I liked Reiki so much because it was like all of the conversation was really getting at what you're talking about when you're saying this is, church is inside and connecting to your higher self, which people call God. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like these energies that we're describing and how we're connecting with them, which for another term to describe that, what you're talking about is a different way of channeling. What are we channeling? We're channeling our higher self, or we're channeling God source, or whatever you want to call it. But you can tell a difference between information that comes through that and information that doesn't, if you spend enough time with it.
Well, yes, and if you're open,
Yeah.
and that's the other piece. I mean, there are a lot of pieces in the call that we're talking about here that have to be there so that as we move through this process, I like your word for that with art. I don't do art, so I didn't know. But as we move through this, then we begin to pull this piece and this piece and this piece that come from our cultural backgrounds, but have shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And they've shifted because they had to. My first biggest shift was in my 20s, and I was babysitting a little boy, a baby. He was 3 months old, and he died. And it was a horrible, horrible thing. I did all sorts of things that day in an order. And crazy things happened when that happened. I didn't know that I was pregnant with my second child, but I had a little boy at home, and he was 2 years old. And so I called my cousin and asked her to come over to take care of him because I called the ambulance. I had baptized him because I knew that his mother had wanted that. They were talking about it. And so I baptized him. And then I called a priest. And when I remember when the priest came, such a kind man. And I mean, I remember that, but these are all pieces. I don't know what order all of it happened. But when he came, I reminded him I had already baptized him. I baptized him. I remember repeating it several times. And he finally said, "It's okay. I'll just give him a blessing." I said, "Oh, okay." Because I knew that once a baptism these are the rules. Once a baptism has taken place, it's complete. It's done. Okay. So in the meantime, my husband called. He never called me during the day. I mean, we didn't have cell phones. He never called me during the day. And I just told him, "You've got to come home right away." That Greg had died. And he didn't know anything more than that. Or if I said anything, I don't know. In the meantime, the ambulance came. They took the baby, and I went with them to the hospital because I thought I would have to tell the mother. I thought that was going to be my job.
Yeah.
And they put me in a room separate from me. And the last thing I remember was that Mickey had come in. She was in the room next to me. They must have told her, and I heard her scream. And I said there was a chaplain there, and I said I need to go to her. And he said, "I think it would be better if you just stayed right here." I didn't realize that I could have been blamed for that, and the pain and the suffering and the grief and shock that hits you when a loved one dies would have been overpowering to see me.
Yeah.
And I was like 20, 21 years old. So I didn't know any better. I just would have taken the responsibility to do that.
Oh, so what a blessing is that they stopped you from going in.
They must have, known if I was coming and I wasn't the mother and I was the one caring for the baby, that was not a good plan.
What happened? Do you mind asking?
No, I don't mind. I had him, he'd only rolled over once in the time I had him. And I had put him down for his nap on my bed in the bedroom. It was a double bed. And he rolled, and he must have rolled several times, but he got pinned between the wall and the bed and suffocated.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so when I found him, I looked and he wasn't there. And I mean, horrible. It was just horrible. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
And then my own little boy had woke up, and he was in a crib in the living room because we were poor people, young married couple. And so I had to be sure he was kept happy and quiet. And I had taken little Greg, and like I said, first I went to a window and opened it. It was colder than a well digger's butt in January out there. And I just sort of put him by the window, thinking the air would shock him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went over to the sink and baptized him. And then I put him on the bed, but I turned him over on his tummy because he looked more like he was sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
And that was about my grief.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I actually,
My first huge challenge. My first. I had never really experienced it.
Yeah.
And it's those things that mark you through life.
Oh, yeah. It's always
Mhm.
before this and after that.
Always. And that's when the drinking in me increased. That I can mark that as I mean, I partied and stuff, but I never thought about drink. I did then.
Yeah.
So I had a long road to walk.
Well, that's a big deal. I mean,
It was.
yeah.
But out of it is the good.
Yeah.
You know, um, the interesting thing on that whole thing is the mother was very, very kind to me. Yeah. I had kept his things, the few things I had, his bottle and his blanket and, some of those things that I had at the house. And we had moved. And after we had moved, she came with my cousin and she came over to the house to see me. And I was able to give her those things I had in a box. And I was always so glad I kept them and didn't throw them because I could have in the move. Um, but I knew those things would matter to her. They were the last things he had. So,
Yeah.
but that day I went crazy. I remember that.
Oh.
That was the day the insanity took over.
What do you mean went crazy?
Oh, after I lost Greg, I went on to have 3 more children. And all of that time, I didn't drink every day, but when I drank, I was a problem. I was a huge problem. But the wholeness of that event dogged me because I couldn't get past the guilt I felt in losing him. I didn't go to anybody for counseling. I had brought it up to my husband that I probably needed help, and he didn't. He was young. He was immature. Why? That's those crazy thinkings you have when you're young, that your husband is the one who will guide you. Well, he didn't know any better than I did, but I listened, and that was foolish. I should have gone and gotten some help, but I didn't, and so I had many more years of drinking to salve the pain because of the guilt, and then finally, Alcoholics Anonymous showed me what I had done, and it's true. I never put those things together until I needed help and was willing to get it.
You never put what things together? Oh, you're losing
The
him?
drinking and going crazy. Because I was, no kidding, I was nuts. And it was, probably about 5 years into it before the insanity lifted enough for me to function. And all this time I had children.
Yeah.
My kids are marked with this.
Yeah. Which it's, the more I get into the subconscious stuff. So what you've touched on several times is, it's a culturally created self, which, like
Yes.
collectively we kind of agree to believe certain things. But there's also this individual experience. So every person who's a baby, they connect with their parents. However they connect with their parents, or they don't. That's part of it too. Like that's the spectrum. I don't connect at all, and then I have repercussions of that, or I really do connect, and then I have repercussions of that, or whatever. But we all do that. Nobody's exempt from that. And that means you, the person doing this work, it means your children. And I do find it's an interesting feeling to be aware of this. And then, I have kids. So I'm looking for it because I'm trying to learn this, or I'm trying to understand it better. So I'm looking for this everywhere. And now that I can see it more myself, what are these things that I hold on to that is something that I created in my own energy space, which was not thoughts because it's done before you can speak language. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's these belief systems that are energetic and they're not necessarily only words. These things that I see in myself, I can now see them so much easier in other people because I can see them now, right? Like I couldn't see it. So I went through that, and I'm actually just at the end of cutting the ties that bind, which is the process where what I'm doing now is actually I just finished it yesterday, which I'm so happy because I was I was so tired of, I don't know. I don't even know what I was tired of. I was just kind of tired of doing it. I needed a break. I want to like have fun, be happy or whatever. Not that I wasn't, but for me, it was 10 weeks of essentially having my dreams analyzed, which looks all the subconscious, right? Okay.
Absolutely. I mean,
oh my gosh, the stuff
like being on steroids.
Yes, that's kind of what it felt like. Yeah, that exactly is what it felt like. And I got it in about 2 weeks, and I was like, oh, I'm so tired. Like I'm just sleeping so much because I'm so tired. But of course, because I'm trying to remember my dreams, I'm also trying to wake up and type my dreams, which doesn't make for a fluid like sleep pattern. So it's
You're
not
sleeping
just
back too.
yes. And like I told it, I saw the chiropractor yesterday and I told him, I was like, oh yeah, I'm also doing this process and I feel like I'm going to work at night. That's really what I mean. It's not like a physical, it affects the physical because I don't sleep as soundly or as long. But yeah, but I can see it in other people, and I look for it in my kids, of course. I look for it in my husband. I look for it like everywhere I see this, and it is just amazing. Matter of fact, so I when I really understood the importance of this, because I do graphic design and art, right? It's always been okay. Well, I understand something. I'm like, okay, I have an image in my head. Now the question is like, how do I create this thing to make it in the world so that other people can understand this? And so when I'm going through this process, I realize, oh, this is really important. Like, this is no joke. This is super important, probably one of the most important things. So I need to make something. So just made in my notebook, basically did a drawing, made this title. And because I'm so tired or whatever, I'm going through this process and I keep thinking, I got to go back because you create this list of all these things that you start to recognize. Okay. And I didn't like it at first because it was like, oh, we're just looking at all the bad stuff, you know? And that's not really objectively true, which is totally irrelevant. But I didn't want to be like dogging my mother because I love her. And, I thought overall it was a good experience. Right. But, after a while, I started to realize, oh yeah, this is actually really important. And I think they actually put in the process, you can list the good things too. Right. But I think that's like just there for people to get over that hump of, oh, well, they're not all bad. You have to get past that. And you have to just say, okay, well, these are the things that didn't work for me. And
Yeah.
so I actually had two columns and then I quit writing in the good column. I was like, well, it doesn't matter. We're not looking at any of that. So I had these like pages
It's
of
good.
this stuff. Yeah. I had pages of this stuff. And I've been meaning to like put it on this more beautiful drawing page. And I just hadn't done it for whatever reason. Well, I finished the last interpretation yesterday and I realized, okay, now it's time to sit down. And I didn't realize till it was done. But when I got done, I realized, oh, I was waiting for that time and for that experience to be done so that I could then write the things that I needed to write. If I had done it 2 or 3 weeks earlier, I wouldn't have been able to write it as concisely.
There you go.
Because
There
the
you
stuff,
go.
yeah, the stuff that I wrote was not, um, my mom didn't stand up for me. I didn't write that,
Yeah.
right? I wrote to be seen by anyone. And what I meant, I need to go back and change it. To be fully seen by anyone is a beautiful thing.
Ah,
Meaning, so for the process, it was my mother didn't see me, right? Like my mother didn't see what I needed, what I wanted, or what drove me. But that's not really the lesson. The lesson is to be seen, which means you can see yourself too, right? But it
yeah,
wasn't until that moment, until I was done, that I realized that's the process. Like,
that's cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to add one other thing, which is I didn't want to detract from all this other stuff because we're talking about really concrete and poignant examples. But generally speaking, because I don't love fiction stories. And the reason I don't love fiction stories is not because I don't love the story. It's because I have to remember their names. Or if I have to remember the details that I don't care about. Whatever it is. Okay. I'm just being truthful here. Um, so
So don't read them.
I don't. Right, I read until I got to get done with my degree, and then I was like, I only read what I had to read fiction wise for
Yeah.
that. But I don't read fiction. My kids, they love fiction and they talk to me about it, and I just like go gloss out. But what I really did love, and that includes history, because to me, the way that they teach history is here's these facts, you need to memorize them.
Yeah.
Which to me, as somebody who has struggles with that, reads the historical facts, which a lot of people can consider me completely ignorant or whatever negative thing you want to say about me. I read it as this person did this thing. So they're the character in the story and they're doing these things. And you're supposed to memorize the same because it's so important, right? Except they also leave stuff out of history books, right? And stories and all that, whatever. That's another,
Yeah.
yes. So whatever, that's the way it's taught, is that you're supposed to memorize these facts and then you regurgitate them. Okay. When I got a degree in art, you have to take art history and you have to take a lot of it. I had to take 4 courses of it. I'm not sure if it was like 2 years or 4 years. I don't remember because I was just in art history all the time. So, but what I really,
All
really,
different world of me.
yeah.
I think it's cool. Yeah.
Well, so in our history, you look at the most important pieces over time. Like you can get an art history book and they only put certain pieces in there. Well, why did they put certain pieces in there? Because those pieces were important for, and then they could talk to you all about it, right? Well, what I really loved about it, because we covered like basically, I think I made it up to like the 70s, 1970s. So like from the cave paintings to the 1970s, you can't cover everything. And what I loved about it was that artwork, if you're looking at history through art, you're looking at what people genuinely felt was important.
Mhm.
Okay. And matter of fact, I felt like I learned more about the Bible through art history than
Oh,
I ever did at church.
brought down.
Yeah. And so that's what I really loved about art history is like, well, okay, all these people telling all these stories. Let's look at the politicians today, right? Like they can say, oh, this is super important. We're going to shoot him in the head. Oops, I missed. We hit his ear. Okay. Same thing. Really important stories. And I'm not saying that they're not important, but over time, like in 100 years, are we going to be focusing as intently on that particular story about that particular person? Or are we going to be saying, oh, there's some other events that were more important than this particular event, right? And so in our history, you get that.
Yeah. You get that in religious history too.
Yes, I'm sure. Okay, so the thing is that if you look at history like that, you actually get to see the essence, I think, is more accurate, right? You're getting to what's really important, which I think is a good description of what it is to know this God source energy, right? It's an essence. It's not the roles that we play. It's not the details of who did, or like for your example, it's not the order in which the stuff was done.
No,
It's the
no.
importance of those things.
Mhm. And what do you pull out? And
Exactly.
it comes to you. And for me in my life, I pull out these things for me at this age. You pull out these things for you at your age. Somebody in your age group will pull out other things with similar life, but they'll be different. They have to be because the call is different. And
Right. So
that's
you're pulling out what's important for you to understand about your calling so that you
right.
can take the next step forward.
Because we're looking at our her story.
Mm-hmm.
And that story that we've told. And it's been told to us as we have journeyed this call. We don't get to know the call. There are many through our lifetime. There are many paths to take, and we get to make the choices.
So this,
Some things just happen to us.
some things what?
Some things just happen to us, like that baby dying.
Yeah.
That just happened to me. I didn't do anything to cause that. And that was a perfectly healthy baby.
Mm-hmm.
It happened. And who knows why those things are allowed to be in our energy field, in our aura, in our life, wherever we are. Who knows why that is? They are allowed, and we consider them bad. Some of them are evil, some of them are icky, some are just low life, but they're allowed. And Jesus talks about that in the field, walking through the field of wheat, which was also sowed with weeds, because an enemy came along at night and sowed the weeds. Okay. And the apostle said to him, or the workers said to him, should we pull those weeds? No, if you do, you will pull up the grain too. So leave it all. And at the harvest, the harvesters will make the decision. In other words, they'll throw it all out and keep only the good.
Okay, so this is what I love about I mean, the only experience I had with this was Christianity. I'm sure it's in other religions, but the parables.
It is.
We learn as humans, we learn better through story.
Absolutely.
Okay. So,
Master storyteller.
yeah. So, Bashar, do you know who Bashar is?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't watch him all the time, but whatever reason, I got pulled to watch him and I watched him and there's all different kinds of levels of things going on, but I'm just going to go right to the core of it. He usually does his little spiel, then people ask questions. So I was watching this and three people had asked questions. All three of them had done some variation of, okay, in another life, I was this thing and I played this role or, whatever. And I say that it may sound dismissive, even though I do past life regression, right? But it is because he articulated in a way, and I thought, you know what? That is it. That's what I can identify with instead of like when I first started doing the hypnosis. First, it was an experience, and then I realized, not then, I already knew it, but it was more solidified. Time is not linear. So why are
No.
we saying the word past? That's not correct, right?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so I don't argue with people about this. If they need it to be past lives, that's fine. I would prefer to call it other life. Okay. So you get into this meditative state. We do what's called a regression because we like to use the word past. But these people were talking about that and they're saying, but I'm still struggling with this idea about it. And his answer was, okay, look, it doesn't matter if you were part of that lifetime or you were part of this lifetime or, what's happening is you're essentially going into the ethers, you're reaching out for energy that you need.
Yeah.
And he says, you got information you needed from somebody's experience. So you touched into something, you connected to something that gave you a story that gave you information you need. It is completely and 100% irrelevant whether it was you or it was not you or it was somebody else. It doesn't matter. It's the story. It's like the parables. Like you read the story, you understand, you experience what that is, and you get it on a different level and you get the lesson.
Yeah.
That's why I love the parables per se, but it's such a good example
Yeah.
of how I think it works interdimensionally.
Yes. And you can take that theme, it's universal. You can take any of those themes in the parables, and when they reach us universally, they will reach us across all religions, all governments, all societies, all families, all cultures.
So
They
actually, I don't wonder, I actually know this. When I decided to start studying astrology in 2016, I eventually had to pick, like almost like you pick a religion, right? Like, like what method am I going to go with, right? So, but
I
part of
didn't know that because I'd never done, that.
well, astrology is mainly broken up into two main sectors, okay? And you've got from what I understand, you've got the ones who originated the process, which are the Indian version, which
Okay.
is Vedic, okay? Well, they have their own culture, they have their own experience, and so they have stories that go with all that, okay? And they're very
Absolutely.
spiritual beings. Okay, and then after that happened, eventually we have the rise of the Western civilization and they understand like but there's also a point at which where we started to recognize by looking out at the planets that the planets are doing things differently than they thought prior. Okay. But it was the Western group of Western, like, Greek and Roman who first started with that. So the stories that go with what we call Vedic system are based in their culture. Whereas the Western is based in Roman and Greek mythology.
Okay.
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 So, but that's
Yeah.
the stories, right? So we get the stories from Greek and Roman stories, or we get the stories from Indian to understand the concepts of what's presented in astrology.
Yeah.
But it's the concepts that's what's important. It's not the story. It's not the vehicle. It's not whatever person or character it was. It's the ideas behind it, which are conveyed equally the same in each.
Because they're universal in their in their story.
Or they're from source, right? Like it's one way of identifying if something's from source. Yeah.
Always, always, always richer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder too, because there's got to be, so we're talking about the calling, figuring out what your calling is. And you had touched on before, and something immediately popped into my head. Like you had described, I knew that I didn't know all the details, but what I knew was I needed to move to Spokane if I was going to find out, right? So you got
Well,
clearly,
it was said to me,
yeah.
that's
Mhm.
that voice, and it was
Right.
said. It was very clear.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't need to know about it. I mean, like the waving the red flag in front of the bull. Um, I would not know what it was unless I moved, because it belongs here. It belongs in this time, in this way, within me. If I'm here, if I'm not, then
Different story.
there would be a continuation of the. I mean, neither was right or wrong. That's I think that's really important to know in a call. It's not about right and wrong, good and bad. It's about who I am and how I will fulfill my time here on this earth within this body. And if I had stayed in Great Falls, I would have continued on the path I was, which was a 5-year plan in trainings and retreats as well as work. And then I don't know what else I would have done, but I would have been working on that in order to be there, because I'm not going to quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't quit, do you?
Well, I
Maybe.
find it really interesting and going into that space of intuition and listening, the channeling, right? It's really
That
interesting how
is,
some things come through clear like that and some things don't.
well, I know, and it's because we're not ready. Some of it, we're just not ready here to hear it and then to consciously receive it.
Mhm.
You know, it stays unconscious until
Yeah.
I mean, somehow something within us, this
Yeah.
higher self, understands when we're ready, and when we're ready, it just kind of goes poof.
And it is immediate. It is absolutely immediate. And I think it's I would say, it goes across all facets. So I say it's immediate. One of the first times that I remember consciously that had a huge impact on my life, being aware of that was I had dated a boy in high school and college for 7 years. So I was 21. So it was like a third of my life. Okay. And I did the healing. It's a really long time. At that point, I was mad because like, I've just been a third of my life with this person. Um, I had done the work and had kind of like, it's almost like it was instant. I mean, it was like less than 3 days, but I had done the work. I had processed the emotions. I sat with the pain or whatever. And something shifted. And I don't know what it was, but something shifted. And I mean, instantaneously, I like met the person who wound up being my husband, right? Like, and when we talked about it, I was like, I realized when I finally met him and I understood the importance of it, I was like, oh, I wasn't ready. And it
Yeah.
would not have happened any faster. So essentially, my husband, because he was older than me, he was waiting for me to finish doing that job so that then we could work. We could actually happen, right?
Yeah.
And anyways, I think it comes through like that too, but also like really simple things. Like we did our group, and I'm just going to touch on this, but the meditation group that we met Monday, and whatever, all the things that were going on that caused it to happen the way it did, and it did. And Janelle brought in a message, and the message was exactly what we're talking about today, which is,
You're kidding.
no,
You're
no,
not.
no. Do you really need to know all the details? You just need to trust in the process.
Yeah, it's the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, we made a video of that, and this was one of those things that was super duper clear. So I've been very clear about doing the group. I know I want to do it. It's working. Like I've said many times, if this is what I do every day, this is going to be a great problem to have, right? Um, we did the video. I spent a long, long time creating the actual video, and I finally get done with it. And I'm talking to my husband, and he's like trying to figure out return on investment. So how much are you going to charge for this video? And how many hours did you put into it?
Oh
And,
yeah.
right.
Let's
Okay.
find some nitty gritty here and make the bottom line taken care of.
Which of course is not my forte. But
No,
anyways, he's doing all that. And of course I'm starting to realize, oh boy, I really gotta maybe I should
look,
get a lot better at that. But in one of the meditations, And I had already decided this before we even made the video, because in one of the meditations, I had gotten the number. Yes, you're going to go make this video, and this is the price. And it comes through in different ways, but this particular time I saw it. I was like, oh, it's $5.99. $5.99. Okay. All right. And I was confident enough, and then I was like, okay, whatever. And I don't have any regrets about that. But, like if I had taken the approach of like my husband, like, well, how many hours did you put into it? And how much effort have you done? And like, I would never, I don't know. It wouldn't be accessible to a lot of people because I wouldn't price it at $5.99,
Not in this day and age.
Yeah.
But that's what you were told. And that's what you have to follow. If you don't follow those, it comes back around. It comes back around. It comes back around in some form. And that's just the way our lives work.
Yeah.
We have to follow our call. Yeah. And when we don't, we get other chances throughout our life.
Yeah. So that's why learning the lessons is recognizing that you've learned a lesson is a huge thing. Yeah. That you can't put like a numerical something on, you can't like qualify it in terms of humanity, but it's a huge thing to recognize, oh, I've grown through this. I've gotten better.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical and Infamous podcast with the Happy Lion Center. Send requests for topic discussions, questions, and comments to podcast@happylioncenter.com. That's podcast@happylioncenter.com.